Good morning. We're learning as a chus for Shalem Filan Chaya Basarach and for Meir ben Cyril Pera. We're on Daf Kuf Vav Amid Aleph by the two dots. We're still continuing our explanation of the Mishnah. The Mishnah had said, Pirashti Mincha Shel Esrainim. We're talking about a case where a person said, I'm bringing a mincha with a certain amount of Esrainim, and I said how many Esrainim, but I don't remember what I said. So this lashon is a little hard to make sense of. So the Bach changed it. Pirashti mincha shel esrainim v'kavati b'kli echad. Talking about where he said where he did it all in one kli. Ve'eni yedeya ma pirashti. I don't know how many esrainim I said in that kli. I said it's one kli, and I don't know how many. Yavi mincha shel shisha esrainim. Divrei chacham, like we had in our Mishnah. That was the machlekes we had. The Tanakama said he brings a mincha of shishim esrainim, and that will include any amount up to 60. Rabbi Yavi mincha shel esrainim me'echad v'ad shishim. He has to bring a mincha with one isar, then a mincha with two esrainim, and one of three esrainim, all the way up to 60. Shein elef u'shmoinim me'etz u'shloishim, which is 1,830, which is n plus 1 plus n plus 2 plus n plus 3. I think I would have known how to solve for this using my high school algebra, but I no longer remember that. Taisus has an interesting method. Ketzad kach biyotcha ve'echad v'ad shishim v'tzaraf v'tchilasin v'soifen ara emtza. Kegoin echad v'shishim heim samach aleph, shnayim v'nuntes heim samach aleph. You add every combination together, right? You do 60 plus 1 plus 59 plus 2 plus 58 plus 3. They all come out to 61. So you just have to do 61 times all the possible combinations, which is, I think, only 30. Once you get past 30, you're going to be counting the same combination twice. So by doing that way, it comes out to 1,830.
Yes, I guess Taisus went to yeshiva that they had English.
Right. I remember when I did math, the hardest part when I learned math in school was doing things the way they told us. And then they told me the SAT, you don't have to say how you got to it. I said, this is easy. I did much better on that without having to explain myself. I came up with all these kind of Gemara cup. You learn to figure out a way to get to the bottom line. We're on Kuvav Amid Aleph, about a quarter of the way from the bottom. 5 lines up in the narrow lines. The next case. So Pirashti v'neder by Pirashti. Ve'eze mehen Pirashti. It changes also. It's basically Pirashti ve'eni yedea ve'eze mehen Pirashti. Ve'eni yedea kama Pirashti. Not only does he not know whether it was from 1 to 60, how big of a mincha it was, he also doesn't know which one of the 5 possible minchas it was. It was a minchas silas or a minchas machvas or mecheshes or this chalis or a kikin. So yavi chamesh minchas shel shishim esrainim shein shalosh meis. He has to bring, according to the Tanakama, he has to bring 60 because he has to bring one of 60 esrainim because he doesn't know how much. And on top of that, it has to be one of 60 of each of the 5 kinds because he don't know which kind he was intending to bring. Divrei chacham. Rabbi Yavi chamesh minchas shel shishim esrainim me'echad v'ad shishim. He has to bring the number we had said before, 1,830 times 5, because he has to do 1, 2, 3, 4, every possible combination from 1 to 60. Shein tisha alafim u'mei v'chamishim, which is 9,150. Maika miflagi. What is so? That's just the accounting. Now we're going to get back to the svara. Why if someone says I'm bringing a mincha and he doesn't remember whether he said I'm going to bring a mincha with 1 isar, a mincha of 50 isranim, a mincha with 20 isranim, he brings, according to Chacham, he brings just one of 60, and according to Rebbe, he has to bring every possible combination that he could have specified. Amar Rav Chisda b'mutal lekehanim chulin I'm sorry, b'mutal lahachnis chulin lazara kamiflagi. They're arguing about whether one can bring chulin ba'azar in this case. So the point is that they both hold that you cannot mix a nedava, where he had promised he's going to bring some amount, and we don't know how much it is. He cannot take that and say the rest of it should be a nedava. Because then, if you put them together, you're going to have a mixture of a nedava and a chiyuv. Part of it he's saying now, he doesn't know how much it is. He's saying, I want it to be a nedava, and the rest of it should be what I had originally promised, which is a chayv. He said you can't do that. So therefore, what you have to do is you have to say the rest of it should be chulin. And their argument is whether you can bring this flour in and say some of it should be chulin. I don't know. I mean, I always thought that chulin lazar is in general aser. I don't know why that would be a machlekes. I guess it is. I guess it must be that there's a shmandam who says you can't bring chulin lazar. So according to Rabbi Savas al Lazara, so therefore he has to make whatever extra, whatever he's not bringing, has to be in a nedava. So it has to be brought separately. So he doesn't have that option because it's going to be mixed. So therefore he makes one of one, and then a second one with two. Whichever one is the correct one will be the chayva, and the rest will be the nedava, but they're not mixed together like they are according to Rebbe. According to Rebbe, you have the two of them mixed together, so you're not able to make the part that's not the chayva. You can't make it into a nedava. It has to be chulin. So then it comes a question: can you bring that chulin into the azar? That's why. So Rebbe holds you can. Therefore, you can make just one of 60. I'm sorry, I skipped, right. Everyone holds you can't bring chulin to azar. If that's the case, how can the Chacham say you just bring one of 60? Then what if it was only a chayva of 3, and then the rest of it has to be made into chulin? In the first shot, we had said everyone agrees you can't be ma'av chayv ben nedava. But now it's saying no, the Rabban holds you can. So you make one of 60, and you say whatever is not a chayv should be a nedava. It doesn't make a difference that they're mixed together. So therefore, you have to make 60 separate minchas. And one will be the chayva, and the rest will be nedavas. According to the Rabban, who say you can mix a chayva with a nedava, and that's why you can bring just one of 60. You have a problem here. You're saying the amount that was the amount that he had originally obligated himself for, that's going to be the chayva. And the rest is going to be in a nedava. But you have two separate minchas, and you're only taking one kaimitz. So in Echanami, he's going to have to take two kmatzim. Now you have another problem. You don't know how much is the chayva and how much is the nedava. So he's taking two from two parts. But each kaimitz is going to have portions of each. It's going to be coming some of it from the chayv and some from the dava, because it's not specified how much is each. They're not in two separate piles. So no, the total of das kain. Amakol heicha demachi yad the kain hashto chayv ulubseif nedava. Say the first kaimitz that I want, what he takes the kaimitz from. I want the kain's what he takes, that should be part of original. Let's say I'm doing first the chayva. So first he's taking the first kaimitz he's taking for the chayva. The second kaimitz he's taking will be dedicated just to the nedava. You still have another problem. After you take the kaimitz, you have to go burn it. Like Turei Heichi Mikter. How can we makter the kaimitz? Lichten, what is two choices are. Which one should be to haktar first? Lichten Nadava Bereisha. If he does the one of Nadava first, the Chayva Hevi Makdila. How can he then go ahead and be makdir the second kaimitz that's for the part that is addressing what he had been mafarsh? Dilma Kula Chayvahu. He had said any amount from 1 to 60. So it could have been the whole thing. All 60 was a chayva, and they only really needed one kaimitz, as which we'll get to in a minute. But he's saying I wanted to maybe the whole thing is chayva, and therefore you're ready the chesura lo shirayim. That means that you have taken away from what was left over on this and made part of it the kaimitz, which wasn't needed for the nadava. There really was no nadava. You took a kaimitz. There was really no nadava because the chayva was 60. So now you took away the shirayim are missing. If once you're missing part of the shirayim, then you can't be makta kaimitz on them. So lichter chayva reish. So what do you say you'll do? You'll do the chayva first. Then you have a problem. How could you bring the next one? The nadava hechimakbele. How could you bring the nadava? Assuming, let's say, it's 30 and 30. So you already took your kaimitz from the first. The Dilma kul chayvi. What happens if the whole thing is chayva? This whole second kmitza that you're doing was not necessary. Once you already took the full kaimitz that you were supposed to do, and you burnt the kaimitz on the mizbeach, you can no longer take another portion and put it on the mizbeach. There's an isser that once you've put on the part that you're required to put on the mizbeach, you can't burn another part that's not required. We're talking about where the second kmitza that he's now putting on the mizbeach, he said, I want it to be treated as eitzim. I don't want it to be, he really makes a t'nai. He says, if it's needed to be huktar, then I want it to be aktara. But if the first one was a chayva of 60, and this is not necessary, I want this to be treated as eitzim. He says, you only can bring an extra portion on the mizbeach when you makter it as part of a haktara, a legitimate haktara. But if you say, I want it to be eitzim, then it could be eitzim, meaning, like I said, a t'nai of eitzim. He has to leave that possibility that it really was necessary to burn it as the kaimitz of the nadav. Amalei Ravacha Brei Rav Ravashi. The Dilma de Kulyama Mutalar Chayv Dava. Maybe everyone agrees you can mix a chayva with a nadava. If that's the case, why can't you say like the Rabbanan? Why don't we say the machlek is whether we hold like Rabbi Eliezer that whether you can be makter the eitzim? The reason why Rabbi holds you have to do all of them separately is because he doesn't hold you can then bring the kaimitz afterwards. The Rabbanan islu the Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi leslu the Rabbi Eliezer. Amalei Isak Daitach Rabbi Meisel Arab Chayv Mutal Arab Chayv Ben Adava. Whereas the Leslie actually Masi Shisa Mechad Mana V'Chad Mana. He wouldn't have to bring 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. His whole problem with saying now is the problem how could be maktir the other kaimitz. So you don't have to do as much as he did. All you have to do is bring 61. You'll bring 60 in one and 1 in the other. Umagalu v'kamitz. And then he could touch them and be kaimitz them and be maktir both of them. So if it's true that he can't, so he'll say, if all 60 are chayva, then this other one is an adava. And we said mutal arv, you'll touch them together, so they'll both have this one can be he holds it can't be eitzim, but it could be a separate one for the. So you're not mixing. I'm sorry, you're not mixing. Why do you have to touch them? Umagalu becomes. So what does Rashi say? Um, right. So you say because right, it might be that it's like 30 and 30. So you might need this kindness to go on 30 of the original one. So he's making a new nidava. It might be some portion of the first one. So he has to touch them together. So the kmitza could theoretically also be effective for the portion of the first of this original 60 that are a nidava. That's why he has to touch them together. Okay. So therefore therefore you would have this so the chayr we have a problem with this pshat that it would be theoretically possible according to Rabbi to do it in a smaller amount. You wouldn't have to do quite what he had said before. Therefore, the Gemara is going to give several other possibilities of understanding what the machlekes is between the Rabbi and the Rabban and our Mishnah. Rav Amar Dekuli Amar Mutal Arav Chayv Ben Nadav. Everyone agrees you can mix that. And what's the reason for Rabbi? Dekuli Amar Eslu Der Eliezer. Everyone holds like Rabbi Eliezer. What's the problem? We're arguing machlekes of Eliezer and Yaakov and the Rabbanan. It's not. Afilu mincha shel samach esaron noisin lo samach lo. The Tanakama holds, the Chum hold, you have to do one lug for each Yisaron in a mincha. No matter how big, how many Yisraelim of Silas there is in a mincha, you only bring one lug of shemen. Shenam ala mincha v'leik shemen. Rabbanan Savri, so this is a little awkward, this lashon. Rabbanan Savri, Rabbanan Amri Samach lug. The Rabbanan who argue on Rabbi hold like the Rabbanan who say that you need 60 lugin for 60 esrainim. And therefore, you bring a mincha of 60, and whatever the amount that he was mafarish, that's going to be the chayva, and the amount of lugin is going to be the correct amount of lugin. He'll have 60 lugin. So if it was 35, so 35 of the lugin will go for the 35 of the chayva, and the rest, the other 25, will be for the 25 of the dava. Rabbi Savak Rabbi Elazar and Yaakov Amar Ein La'ela Luga. There's only one lug. Lo yadin ichad mincha he the sagila b'chad lug. You don't know if it's one mincha of 60 lug. So of 60, I'm sorry, Yisraelim, which only needs one lug. Ishtei minchas ninu to be in ishtei lug. Or maybe it's less than 60 Yisraelim. Any amount less than 60 Yisraelim, you're going to say part of it is a chayva and part of it is a nedava. So then you need two lugin. That's why he says the only way to satisfy this is going to be to make a different one. You're going to bring with 60 lugin. You're going to bring 60 Yisraelim. I'm sorry, you're not going to bring 60 Yisraelim. You're going to bring one Yisraelim with one lugin, and two Yisraelim with two lugin, three Yisraelim with three lugin. Each one will have the proper amount of lugin, and just one of them will be a chayv, and the rest will be nedavs. Ravashi Amar B'Katan V'Hevi Gadol Kamifadi. They're arguing about whether if someone makes a mechayiv himself to bring a mincha of some amount, if he could bring larger than that, he always has the option of increasing it later. So therefore, you could bring 60, and even if he had been mefarish 1 or 10, the 60 is going to be yaitza. Rabbi Savala yatza. Rabbi holds you not yaitza. So therefore, you have to bring the precise amount. They already have this machlekes. It's not katan v'hevi gadol yatza. Rabbi Ayimela yatza. They have this machlekes legabi an actual carbon, whether you could bring a bigger carbon in place. Where he said, "I'm bringing a small carbon. I'm bringing a small animal," and then can he bring then a big animal? Rabbi says you're not yatza. So we're trichadiyid mabahabak amar Rabbanan mishum da'idi v'idi kaimitzu. Over here, no matter how big of whether it's 60 Yisraelim or one Yisraelim, he just takes one kaimet. So the amount that goes on the Mizbeach is the same. So there's no reason for Rebbe to distinguish between a large one and a small one. Maybe the Chum would be masking if we just said over here by Minchas. Maybe the Chum would be masking to Rebbe in a case where he had promised a small one, and now he's bringing a big one that's significantly different because the amount that's going on the Mizbech, the Imurim of a larger animal are bigger than the Imurim of a smaller animal. Maybe Rebbe would be moided to the Rabbanon Legabi Mincha if we only said that it can't, he says he can't switch where the Imurim change in size, but by a Mincha where they don't change size and Moida. Shricha, that's what we need, both of them. Zok the Mishnah. Harele Eitzim. Someone says, I'm bringing Eitzim. Lo Yifkas Mishnei Gezirin. He's bringing a Mincha of just Eitzim, a carbon of just Eitzim. He has to bring 2 Gezirin, which are 2 blocks of wood. Levaina Lo Yifkas Mikaimitz. He says, I bring Levaina, he brings the Kaimitz. Chamisha Kamatzim. In the Gemara, the Mishnah just tells us, by the way, once we mentioned Kamatzim, there are 5 places where the shear of Kaimitz is relevant. Ha'imar alai Levaina Lo Yifkas Mikaimitz. We just said that someone who's donating a kaimet, levina, brings the kaimetz of levina, that amount he can take in his fist. Hamanad of mincha yavim a kaimetz levina. Most menachos, almost all menachos need a levina with it, and you bring a kaimetz of levina with it. Hamales a kaimetz b'chutz chayev. Someone who brings a kaimetz of a in Menachos, if someone takes the kaimitz is the amount that you can be chayav for doing buchutz. Shnei bezichen to unin shnei kamatzim, and we know about the shnei bezichen that you have with the lechem upon him. They need 2 kamatzim. Okay, so those are the 5 kamatzim. Now we resume talking about the amount when someone says, without saying a specific amount, how much he has to bring. He brings a dinner zav. That's the standard amount that a person means when he didn't specify. Kesef he shouldn't do less than a dinar of kesef. If he says copper, he should do the amount of copper that's equivalent to a ma'av kesef, the amount of copper that's worth 1 ma'av kesef. But that's what he didn't. He wasn't mafarish. Pirashti v'nei ma pirashti. If he was mafarish, but he doesn't remember how much mafarish, okay, maybe achayomer loy lekachnes kavanti. This is going to be a tough one on him. If he said I set an amount of gold and I don't remember how much it is, he can't just bring the standard amount of gold. We can't say, like we said before, you do a dinar zav, which is the standard amount, because maybe he had said 10 dinars, or maybe it said 1,000 dinars, or 1,000,000. So we have to just say, what's the most potentially? I don't remember when I said it that I was choking and a gun was being held to my head. So I have to figure out what is the most that I could have possibly meant to give, and that's how much you have to give. So you have to be honest with yourself.
It's a translation of give until it hurts.
Right. Well, right. You have to know if it was said, if they were bidding for an aliyah, maybe you have to guess a higher number than if you're just sitting in the comfort of his own office. Carbon, the pasuk carbon that it says by Mincha tells you, what's the pasuk? Menachos kisakav carbon Mincha Hashem soilas yeh karbonai v'yatzikol Hashem v'nasan levaina. So it says kisakav carbon Mincha. That tells you it's an extra word to tell you that you also menadav eitzim. The kama shnei geziri. The amount is shnei geziri, like you said in the Mishnah. B'cheinu oimer b'geraz epalmo al carbon eitzim. That it says we call it carbon ha'eitzim. That tells you that we find that it's called. There's a second limud for the same thing. So that tells you also that eitzim are considered a carbon. Rebbe Aimer eitzim carbon. Rebbe says this goes so far as to tell you that eitzim are considered a carbon, that they're treated like a mincha. It's not just eitzim, which is a whole different thing than something that's edible like a mincha. No, it's a real mincha. So they're tu'unin melech, they need salt, or tu'unin hagasha, you have to bring them close to touch them to the corner of the mizbeach, like you do with a mincha. Amaravu, l'divrei Rebbe, eitzim tu'unim kmitza. He says, go so far as to say you have to do kmitza, you have to grind it up and take some of the sawdust and do a kmitza with it. Amar Papa, l'divrei Rebbe, eitzim tzrichem eitzim. He goes so far as to say, since it's a mincha, you take the kaimitz and you burn it on the mizbech. You can't just burn it. You can't just put a match to it. You have to put it on top of other wood, just like you do with every other kmitza from a mincha. The Mishnah continued, Levina liyivchas min ha-kaimitz. We said, Levina, you have to bring a kaimitz of Levina. Minal, and said, V'her mimena v'kumtzoi. Yisrael samucho mishamna. That's called ha-Levina. The Torah says, you meirim a kaimitz from the silas. And then it says, "Let's call Levina." Makish Levina laharama de mincha. We compare the Levina to the what you take out of the mincha maharama. The mincha kaimitz af Levina nami kaimitz. They're both going to need a kaimitz. Hanaravan harei alayla mizbeach yavi Levina. Someone says, "I want to bring something for the mizbeach." He didn't say what. He said an open-ended statement. You should bring Levina. She'ein l'chadav shekarv l'gam mizbeach al Levina. Levina is the only thing that's purely you give it, and it's fully burnt only on the mizbeach. Nothing goes anywhere else. Pirashti ve'nidei ma pirashti. If he was mafarish, he says, I'm giving something mizbeach, but he doesn't know what it was. He said, Yav michol davar shekavel mizbeach. Levina is not the only thing that's karav l'mizbeach. It purely goes on the mizbeach. It doesn't go to kehanim. But as we're going to see, it's this thing. So if he said, Harei alayla mizbeach without being mafarish, then it means levina, because that's the most only lemizbeach. But if he says he was mafarish something for the mizbeach, then it could be that's a little bit of it's a possibility that he said something else that is also only goes on the mizbeach and not to kaihan. So specting him up. So now we're saying that when he said Harei alayla mizbeach, it means the levina. We're asking about, but there are other things that are only burnt on the mizbeach. What about an oila that's fully burnt on the mizbeach? Why can't we say he meant an oila? No, because the skin of the behemoth goes to the kehanim. So it's not as, even though there's nothing eaten by the kehanim, there's parts that go to the kehanim. So when he said it was a mefarish, it could mean an oila. But when he wasn't mefarish, we say he means a levina. There's no skin, there's no leather. There is the feathers and the innards that get burnt on the side of the mizbeach. What about wine that gets poured down into the holes on the mizbeach? So none of it goes to kehanim and nothing goes anywhere else. So it's not burnt on the mizbeach. When you say the mizbeach, you mean something that's burnt. So therefore, you mean the levina. What about the minchas nesachim? That's something that goes along together with a carbon, or you can even, you can bring it even on its own, and this is fully burnt. There's no kaimet, there's no separating it and going to the kehanim. Since it's part of the family of minchas that other minchas are eaten by kehanim, therefore he wouldn't mean it when he says Harei alayla mizbeach. The Mishnah continues. Harei alayla zav yichas midin zav. He said it should be. I'm bringing zav. It should be at least. It should be a dinar zav. That's the default. The dilma naska. How do we know he means to bring? This is the minimum coin of a zav. Maybe he means a naska, a piece of zav, which is less. He said a coin. The dilma priti. Maybe he means a minimal coin, the smallest coin of zav. It's not likely. People don't use small coins. It's like a doubloon, right? You never heard of a pirate stealing anything other than doubloons of gold. There might be some other coins, but we don't deal with them. How do we know it's not a piece of silver? He said a coin of silver. The Dilma Priti, why can't it be the smaller coin? And that we know that people do use smaller coins of silver. We're talking about it, while it's true that around the world they use small coins of silver, we're talking about a place where they don't. If we said a nechaysh should be a ma'ah of kesef, Tanya Belezer and Yaakov Yivchas mitzinoira ktana shal nechayshis. He says that rather than a ma'ah of kesef, it should be like a small copper fork. Lamai chazi, what is it used for? Rabaya shemechatan ba psilas mekancha ba neris. It's used for cutting the wicks and for cleaning out the neris in the base in the menorah. Barzel was not addressed in the Mishnah. What about metal? It's general metal. Tanya, it can't be less than what's used to chase away the oirevs. That means like if you ever had like I have right now, birds that go on top of your air conditioner. So they put these spikes on top of it to keep the air conditioner, the birds off of it. So this is what they would use on top of the walls. But kama, how much is that? Rav Yosef Amal Lama. You could Amil Yivchus me Amal Lama. My Chazim Rav Yosef the Kal Yarib, the same shot. Let's quickly see the next Mishnah. Harei Alei Yain LeYivchus Mishoy Shalugin. Someone says I'm bringing yain, it can't be do less than 3 lugin. Shemen LeYivchus Miluk, and Shemen not less than a lug. Rabbi Aimer Shloy Shalugin. Rabbi says for Shemen also it's 3 lugin. Pirashti Yavi Ki Yoim Meruba. If he said an amount, he brings like the amount of the day which we already came across, which was the first day of Yom Tov. He has to bring that the amount that would have been brought by the tzibur on that day. Tarabat Ezrach Malamet Sheminavin Yayin. The pasuk says an extra word Ezrach by Kol Ezrach Yasa Kocha as El Lahakav Isha Reich Nichayach Lashem by Mincha. Malamet Sheminavin Yayin. Extra word Ezrach is to tell you it could also be Menadav Yayin. The Kama Shloisha Lugin. He brings 3 lugin. How do we know that if he wants to bring more, he brings more Talmud Leimer? Yeah, he could be Menadav more. Yachal Yivchais Talmud Leimer Kachat. But the Torah says Kachat, he can't do less than that minimum of 3 lugin. Shemen, because as we'll see, Yayin, the smallest amount of Yayin that's brought is 3 lugin. Shemen Yivchas Minalug, Rabbi Yaim is Shloisha lugin. They argue about Shemen. But Michael Mifkli, we're Rabbanan Kabei Der Papa. B'dan mino, v'ukim ba'asra. They're arguing about when you learn something out, do you learn it out from the place, do you apply the rules of where you learned it out from, or the place you learned it to, what you're learning at? Rabban Savi damina umina. You learn it out, you learn out Shemen from the place that it's learned out from. Rabbanan said, Shemen le'yichos milug. Ma mincha menadon and af shemen nami misnaven. We know ma mincha belug af shemen belug. Just like a mincha can be with the loig, so the shemen also can be with the loig. Rabbi said dami novel kivasa. No, you learn out from where you're learning it out too. Ma mincha misnadven af shemen nami misnaven. You'll tackle learn out from mincha that you can be menadev. So too shemen you could do on its own. Uki ba'asa k'nechasim. Ma nechasim shlosh lugin. Just like nesachim that you bring, the yayin we said is going to be 3 lugin. Afsher nami shlosh lugin. We learn out from the shemen is compared to the wine of a nesacha. Amalahu rapapa. Imi mincha gamala Rabbi dekul yamalei pli dami nav mina. If you learn it out from mincha, everyone. That's where he learned it out. Everyone agreed that you learn it out from there. It should only be 1 lug. Ela Rabbi me'ezrach gamala. He doesn't learn out from mincha. He learns out from the word ezrach, which is not by mincha. That's by
Nesachim.
by nesachim, right? And nesachim is 3. Amalei Rav Huna Breder Rav Nasim Rav Papa Mimat Samar Hachi. Can you say he really learns it out from ezrach? It's not true. Tanya Kavim Malamish Misavim Shemen become a social yugan. We have a bryce that says directly it's learned from carbon and not from ezrach. Man Shamalei Damish Shulum Rabbi Bekamai Sila Mikarbon. Amalei Tanya. He says you're right. If there's a bryce that says I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. What can I do? Pirashti Menidei Ma Pirashti Yavi Kiyoy Meru. We said he has to bring the amount that's given on the day that's most. Tana Kiyoy Tavarish Chag Shechali is B'Shabbos, like we said. On that day, you have to make the cheshbon of how much for each of the different Nesachim, it depends on the size of the animal, and you make a cheshbon, and that's how many he has to bring. Okay, we'll stop over here. Shkoyach.
Thank you. Have a
I
great
feel
day.
like I'm up to date, really.